Going to look at alternative crops and crop rotations in cereals with a twist, okay? A lot of you went to the breakout session, so you know basically about where I'm coming from. I'm stockless, I'm organic, I do minimum tillage, I'm doing everything I shouldn't be doing. I'm still at it. Basically, that's where I'm from. I just finished a master's in SRUC in Scotland. I'm in the Blackwater Valley, and I'm between 87 and 90 metres above sea level, and I have just over a metre of rainfall. I have about 8 or 9 inches of soil, and it's sandy silt loam. There you go, and we'll go to this one. Okay, I'm here to talk about when I went into organics. I read Nick Lampkin's book, and it was predicated that I was going to have stock. I do not have buildings, I do not have any fencing, I have no infrastructure for stock. So I had to, like Christine Jones said this morning, I had to take an Irish approach to this. So I decided to go minimum tillage, to have all spring cropping, and to do winter cover crops. We're here on crops and cereals because we want to add value. Organic farming is like any other farming at the moment, right? And we wanted to make it as successful and as profitable as possible. So a lot of that can be predicated to different varieties and adding value on the farm to different varieties, because all protein crops, most of human consumption crops, are actually brought in from outside of this country. Even Flahavans are minus about 3,000 tonnes of organic oats at the moment. So it's not that we are self-sufficient and we have a surplus in organic cereals. I have tended to look at milling crops and wheat since I went in, and I've tried at this stage about 15 different varieties. Why? Because protein is a problem in growing wheat for the baking sector. But I have that sorted, okay? What that means is that if I grow a crop that's suitable for milling, it also means that I can sell it to a bakery. I am basically, in the last 6 months, I've had about 6 phone calls looking for organic grains for artisan food producers. So any of you out there that thinks that what markets can I do, forget about animal feeds and go to the next level, go to human consumption. That's where the extra profit margin is. But you find the market, you look at the specifications, whether it's quality, whether it's screenings, whether it's storage, and you work back from there. But don't tell the person you're going to supply them in 6 months, because you'll probably grow the crop for about 2 to 3 years before you'll get successful enough at it to give them a constant supply. It's no good you're dipping in and out of it. It is profitable, but you must also look at the infrastructure that you must put in place to make it sustainable going forward. Oats, we know Flahavans are the main end users in Ireland, and they still can't get enough of it. But that doesn't mean that everyone is going to keep growing oats. Diversification is where it's at as well. And diversification, as regards, is multiple streams of income. Barley is so tricky to grow in an organic situation. Some of the guys here, like Trevor Harrison, Dim and Adam Mooney, they're making good money out of barley now through the distilling and through the brewing side of things, but that's a very limited market, and hopefully we'll all get in there at some stage. Rye tends to be a fantastic crop if you have very marginal ground and you want to get a crop. Rye for milling is actually very low yielding. It's specific varietal choice, and there is an actual market for it. But like I said, don't grow it and look for a market. Look for a market and then grow it. Okay? Triticale is quite interesting. Triticale was very fashionable when everybody went into organics back 10, 15 years ago. Everybody wanted to grow triticale. Triticale basically fell out of fashion. Triticale, if any of you have young stock, it's absolutely fantastic as regard the feed for young stock because it has a higher fibre content and the starch profile is actually really suited to younger cattle. They do extremely well on a mix of it. But there's actually a niche market for triticale flour at the moment, and there is a deficit of it in the UK. So these are all alternatives. They're add-ons. They make a small farm more viable. There are grants out there. There is educational grants out there. All of this can make a marginal farm profitable without having to go outside the farm for a job. This is the most probably interesting part of organics for me at the moment, from a biological point of view and from a marketing point of view. All pulses, call it protein, is brought into this country, whether it's for human consumption or whether it's for animal feeding. The amount that's actually produced here is minimal, so it's probably irrelevant. If someone said to me, which is the easiest thing to grow? The easiest thing to grow in your rotation to extend it or put a protein crop in is put in a combi crop. Mark Galanders, where's he gone? Stand up. I don't have long, come on. Mark Galanders is growing combi crops. I'm not, in Monaghan, okay? All right? So if any of you afters want to ask Mark about growing combi crops, he's a mine of information, right? And I think everybody should talk to him about it, okay? You can sit down now. Right? The combi crop is basically a pea with a pea in a horse mix of either barley, oats, wheat, either or just a singular crop. And this is probably the easiest way to get into growing a protein crop on your farm. Very clever what the Germans are doing at the moment. They are doing a combi crop of oats with a pea. They are separating the fractions at the harvest. They are sending the oats to porridge, and they're sending the peas to animal feed. They're also doing it with oats and malting barley. It's a harder fractions to separate, but they get a higher quality of a malting barley because of the combination of the two crops in the ground. It's just something to think about. Lupins. I grow lupins with 6 years. Before I tell you about them, right, my first cash crop, I put it on the feed section of Organic Trust, lupins for sale. Nobody knew that a lupin was a protein crop for animal feed, and the only people who rang me up were gardeners wanting seeds for flowers. So I just said, right, rang them up, I says, protein, 32%. 10 calls, 2 minutes, it was gone. So now you know that lupins are the closest thing to soybeans as regards protein content. I'm a big fan of them. On another context, as regards the explosion of mycelium in the ground for breaking down the organic matter, since I introduced that into the rotation, has been absolutely staggering. It even loves the straw from the linseed. So it's quite a difficult crop to grow. So if any of you are brave enough, right, combi crop is the way to go to introduce yourselves into peas. If Brexit doesn't happen, there's a huge market in the UK for marrow fats and for different types of peas and different types of faba beans for human consumption. They are strict on their quality, but the margin is very good. So it means that you put the effort in, it extends your rotation, you have a diversity, but you also have a better profit margin. Beans are very interesting from the faba bean side or from people here because they're actually easy enough to grow, but they do have a problem with chocolate spot, as we referred to yesterday. But they're growing quite widely now in Europe as regards intercropping. What works very well with that, if people are have land that are in a winter cropping situation, if you grow beans and you undersow it with the likes of a 2 or 3 way clover mix, or even a Westerwolds mix as well, but it's a timing thing, okay? You can have a most fantastic bang for your buck as regards a yield after your beans, because you have 3 different mixes which are legumes breaking down, and they tend to break down at a slower rate. Some of them are more than others, and you get a constant feed through the growing season, and you get a most phenomenal crop of wheat if you can do intercropping correctly in a bean situation. Other crops. These are the crops that you can make a lot of money out of, or you'd swear you'll never grow them again. I grow linseed constantly. It's probably my most profitable crop. When I grew it first, my market was the UK, then my market is Ireland. If the Irish market went in the morning, the problem is what will happen with Brexit. I'd end up bringing it to France if I have to, but there's no need. All I have to do is take it to a second stage, and I will have an on-farm enterprise of selling linseed. I tend to do a golden linseed, which is suitable for cereals and for your porridges and your muesli mixes, and it's suitable for oil extraction as well. There's a huge benefit. I have a cousin who's an optician, and anybody getting their cataracts done now, he tells them to take flax oil for 3 months before they get their cataracts done for lubrication at the back of their eye. So it's a standard now. So there's an opening for any of these things by adding value and by starting another on-farm business. Because people, even though it is a biological conference, people must look at all of this because it's all interacted. Because the more you can put into this and the more success you can make of this, the whole thing comes together because you have a lifestyle out of it as well. Because you're working with nature, and nature in return is actually working back and giving you a living out of it. So sunflowers, I do sunflowers, but they're for cut flowers, and they're predominantly for the hospice, for raising funds. Okay? They are actually all pictures that are actually from the farm, all right? They would be the lupins over in my hands if you're looking to see what a lupin looks like. That's quinoa, and that would be the sunflowers. But the biodiversity and the bumblebees absolutely love sunflowers. They will probably stay in them all day, and they'll basically bed and breakfast in them overnight, and they'll be there the following morning. So you could be 200 meters away, and you'll hear the buzz of the bumblebees inside in the sunflowers. My rotation, because I do lupins and I would do linseed as well, I would have in excess of 20% of my cropping area flowering. So I could take a walk in the evenings and I will have my linseed flowering blue, and I'll have my lupins probably in the next field, and you can have your sunflowers as well. So what that has done is the biodiversity that it has brought in and the complexity that has brought into my rotation. Christine was on about the amount of mixes in her green cover. I looked at it from my perspective, and I put that mix into my cash cropping because I wasn't getting the bang for my buck by doing them in the autumn. So I just use scavenger crops in the autumn now to mop up everything. So that's why I've gone to undersowing with clovers where they're most productive when the soil temperature rises and they're undersown. So it's a complex thing I'm working with, but it is working for me from an Irish perspective. So the likes of quinoa and amaranth, very specialised. We've tried it, just to try it. It's a success. That would actually work well probably now inside in Jim Cronin. He'd probably go nuts for it, okay? It can be done in small quantities, hand harvested if you wanted to, and you can actually sell them to farmers markets as well. Jim's quinoa. I see rate camelina. I don't go into seed rape, right? I've tried camelina, no problem with it. It's oil extraction, you have been Colchester and he's at that. It's an added value product. Buckwheat. I've had 2 phone calls about would I grow buckwheat for flour. Most of you have been on holidays in France, you know, the galettes, they are made from buckwheat. And there's a big interest in buckwheat. I have grown buckwheat. I grow buckwheat for green cover. I've harvested with the combine. And I decided to plant it again. Successful, no problem with it. There is different varieties to get for it, but it's a niche market. If people wanted to try it and they know they could grow it, it's just a matter of cleaning it. There's a small amount of dehulling involved, right? But you have added value to the product, and it is a diverse product as well. It's very good for making pea available in the ground, and it's very good for biodiversity. I couldn't manage borage this year. Now Klaus is probably still looking at me since last night when I mentioned to him, but I'm trying borage this year coming. The cosmetic industry in Ireland, there's quite a number of cosmetic industries that are actually putting in organic sourced oils and essential oils, and there's actually a market for it. It's quite specialized, but it's no harm. What I'm saying here today is I want people here to think outside the box. You've come here, right? Everyone knows the staples of your wheat, oats, barley, or whatever, right? But think about what else is coming in. You're in a situation whereas you can add value, or it's product substitution. It's not rocket science. Some of these might take a bit of tweaking for the Irish climate, but it's possible to do it. So it's basically what this is about, is to put you thinking about how I can make it more profitable. Don't go mad now, but just calm down and just think about it, okay? Find out first about, look at the characteristics of the growth patterns. You can manipulate them slightly, okay? Lentils. I'm going to grow a couple of acres of them commercially this year. I grew them, next year. This year I grew them intercropped, and I was very happy. They need a nurse crop. You know, we don't have the man in the white can, so I need to keep them off the ground. I tried chickpeas. Chickpeas, my variety wasn't great. I'm trying another variety, but Irish lentils kind of sound good, you know. So, you know, it's worth a shot. And so you'll know, if you do try lentils, they're a legume, they're a nitrogen fixing, they're a green cover, they're quite good for Jim Cronin. You have that anyway, so you're not going to lose out. These are an array of cover crops, okay, that I know that I undersaw that some of you do. When I went into it first, it was red clover I was doing as per what was recommended. 20% to 25% sometimes of my farm was out of production. And to me that was no good, because my net profit over the whole farm, right, I had to carry that 25 acres from the rest of my land, right, even though it was fertility building, it was a cost. So that's why I went to continuous cash cropping with undersowing, so that to try and make a farm of a certain size viable. So I do not put any brassica style cover crops in. Anything that's non-mycorrhizal, I tend not to use them. It's just, I have nothing against them, but I tend not to put them in to my rotation or my cover cropping rotation at the moment. I want to try and keep my mycorrhiza being built up in the ground, because I was coming from a farm that had 40 to 50 years of continuous tillage with sugar beet and winter rye seed rape, and I had an organic matter of between 1.7 and 1.9. Basically, the ground was trashed, right? So that's why I went min tilling. I had to try and get a mulch on top of the ground that I could come out of it from transition. And hopefully I'm succeeding. So that's the background of where I'm coming from all of this. I could come along here and do a very boring rotation to ye, and everyone would be happy with it. But you shouldn't. People have started to think about, especially beef farmers, that they could maybe grow more organic oats or grow more feeding, combi crops, you name it, right? But you should also start thinking about the next stage. What you've actually started doing is you started upskilling yourselves to grow crops. Let's be honest, right? Oats was meant for organics. You really can't go wrong with it. Okay? So what you're doing without you realising it is you're upskilling yourselves to a level to grow a cereal. Take it to the next level to upskill to grow a legume. And when you're confident with that, take it to the next level to go niche cropping. Because there is lots of opportunities out there to do it. Okay? But calm down, curb the enthusiasm a small bit for the niche cropping, right? Okay? All right? Just slowly, all right? And you'll get there. I mainly use the oats and the triticale and the rye as mopping up my green manures, as a mopping up green manure over the winter. Because I look at it, the window on the winter, if you put out nitrogen fixing, soil temperatures drop, it will not fix nitrogen. It has cost you money. I have put out vetches and they only need to decide to start growing when I start disking them out in the spring. So I have put in the likes of them, and why I put in them, it's not the biomass over the ground I put them in for. They are a relative of the grass species. They have a huge amount of biomass, root mass under the ground that they will keep going over the winter. That's why I use the likes of them. To me, they work out the best for me as regards soft tissue, production and biomass for under the ground, and mopping up any residual nitrogen that's actually there. So that's where I'm coming from there. If I'd longer to do it, if I was taking ground out of fallow or something, I would use a mix of the likes of what Christine Jones is doing, and maybe 10, 12, 15 species mix. Yes, that works then. But my window is short, and I'm tailoring what I am doing to my type of farming. Everyone knows about the typical rotation when you did your course. It's basically predicated on that you're going to have stocking and you're going to have lay ground. In the masters I did, most of the people who grow oats for flahavans, their rotation tended to be, the majority of them was either 3 years lay or fertility building and 2 years oats, or 3 years lay, 2 years oats, and another crop. So that's quite an expensive rotation if you don't lengthen the rotation, because you have the cost of reseeding again. And not only that, will you have the cost of that reseeding recovered before you're gone back in again. So I had said to some of the participants, why don't you extend the rotation, get a fertility building crop, another crop of oats out of it, and then go back into your lay ground, and you will recover your costs better that way. That then basically can be specific to your type of farm, whether you're on heavy ground, whether you're on up near Monaghan, or whether you're on down in the sunny southeast. All of this will have to be tailored to your own farms, and only you really will probably find out what will actually work for yourself. So that's why I'm saying to you that the location and your soil type is going to be specific to your own rotation. And of course, the weather, because one instance was Mark Landers was cutting a combi crop this year, and I sent him a picture on WhatsApp. I was disking in a green manure, and the dust was coming back off the back of the disc harrow, and he was nearly stuck inside in the side of a hill above a Monaghan. But he has a ground that can out-yield my land, but I can grow a niche crop that he can't. So what you have is you have a balance. Combi crops are the simplest way to extend anybody's rotation. They're a no-brainer for anybody who wants to extend the rotation and get another cash crop. If you are brave enough and you're confident after that, put in a legume. Okay? Now, people are putting in the likes of a faba bean and they're putting in a late maturing wheat. What's that doing is the late maturing wheat is coming in roughly the same time as the faba bean, and you can buy a second-hand seed dresser in the UK for about 600 sterling and divide the two of them, which means that you have a pile of faba beans and a pile of wheat. You can sell them separately or dry them separately. It's an option. Intercropping has started to become very popular. I intercrop some of the linseed because the linseed has a trait with legumes that it can actually senesce an intercrop with it. What it means is if you had a legume that tends to ripen slowly and you don't want to be cutting it maybe in October or further out, if you intercrop with other crops, linseed tends to be very good at this. Whatever chemical it does, whatever it does to the synergy with the two plants, it will actually switch a late maturing legume off and they will both senesce close enough together. I have found that out and it is actually working for me, and it's something to work out. A lot of people don't realise in conventional that organic crops tend to ripen slower and they go later. The first year I grew linseed, I cut it the 11th of November. Okay? I cut from pairing back, I now have cut my linseed this year the first week in September. And I've done that last year as well. So by tweaking what I do in an organic situation, you can deal with some of these situations. So undersowing is what I do. I think it is something I don't want everybody to go out, I'm going undersowing everything in the morning, because it's quite tricky. Undersowing, the quantity of what you put out will vary from farm, soil type, where you are in your rotation and where you are in Ireland. So I would prefer that you'd start small and build up rather than build and work back down as regards quantities. But what it does for me is this. You don't set them and your cash crop together, because both will compete for the same nutrients and you will get a lower yielding cash crop. You set your cash crop, and at about growth stage 31, just maybe coming close to first node in the tillering, I would go in with a harrowcomb weeder and a seeder on the back and put it in then. What you've done then is it will germinate, but the dominant crop in the field is your cash crop. This will take off, but at a slower pace, because the cash crop will start sheltering it and it will be slightly starved for sunlight. But what will happen is it will be setting a root structure and setting its own, it will be basically maturing under the ground until your cash crop will start senescing. And once that happens, the ground will become a blanket of a legume, which means that, especially with the likes of crimson clover, it's an annual, so it has it in its head, I need to set as much nitrogen as I can over the shortest period of time. Other legumes, like clover, can take 2 years to do that. That's too slow for me. I need something that will suit my rotation and suit my timeline. Crimson clover does that. So I have started with 1.5 kgs to the acre to 2.5, depending on the soil type and depending on the year. That's where I'm coming from, and I think that's where. There's one more thing I want to say, Dara. Okay, right? I'll jump to this. Okay. I have talked about the viability and adding value and starting on-farm businesses and alternative crops. But on the other side of it, as well as that I got for free, okay, is huge satisfaction. All right? And it's the bottom line here. Any livestock farmers here like to stroll out in the evenings and maybe look at the cattle and say they're nice, and they look at you grazing away, and they got a contentment and you got a contentment regardless of the price. Well, right. I walked out this year, okay? I could hear the bees about 200 metres away. Linseed is lovely. Linseed opens its flowers in the morning and they drop in the evening. One day. So you have a flowering period of about 10 days. When you walk into a linseed field that has finished flowering and you just part the crop, the ground is blue and it'll stay blue for a couple of weeks, okay? And I had my lupins and they were flowering as well. So the background noise wasn't farm machinery, it was insects. And I have a passageway down one field, and strolling up against me was a hedgehog. Okay? And I stopped, and the hedgehog took her time, and she looked up at me, right? And goes, oh yeah. And kept on going, but there was 3 baby hedgehogs after the mammy hedgehog, the size of a tennis ball, right? And they're trundling along, and I was saying, right, I'm making a living from this. I'm trying to add value. I have biodiversity. It has come back, right? I must be doing something right. So when I saw that evening, right, I said, they're here because slugs, snails, I have a biodiversity coming back into the soil, right? I said, happy days. So, thanks.